G'day guys, welcome to the Origin Canine podcast, where our mission is to enhance the full life cycle of working canines and handlers. The podcast is now available on YouTube and all major podcast platforms. If you're looking for our Australian-made tactical canine equipment, go to origincanine.com. Enjoy the show. Action. All right, action. Guys, welcome to another episode of the Origin Canine podcast. So today we've got Evan Nolte. Evan, you might know him on Instagram as Denmother Canine. And bro, your business is called Paravet Canine, right?
Yeah, the LLC is named Paravet Canine. And then I just had the Denmother thing is kind of an interesting story that started as I was leaving the Army.
Yeah, and that was because that's the Team Daddy Denmother thing, right?
Yeah.
Now
And
I know that.
I mean, I had no from the last one.
Yeah, I was gonna for anyone listening, Evan and I have already done a podcast, but the sound quality was really shit between me and you. I think mine was really quiet, yours was loud, so I was just like, nah. You're too good a dude
all the time
to have a shit podcast. So I was like, we just decided to do it again. So here we are.
Yeah, and I don't think I've ever listened to that. So, and some of your questions caught me off guard. So with this podcast, you probably compare it to the old one and see how full of shit I am, you know?
Oh, mate, I reckon I'll just delete that one and just put this one over the top of it instead.
Start over.
Yeah, because if somebody is new to the podcast, I want them to be able to hear your story properly, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What questions got you off guard?
Oh, when you started asking childhood stuff, I didn't know you were gonna let's delve back into when you're 8 years old. What was that like?
Yeah. You're like, I don't know, I'm a fucking adult now. Well, should we hit it off there, bro? Should we go back to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm ready for. I took notes. I didn't take notes, but I'm ready. I saw some of the questions on Instagram, so. But
there's a couple of good ones, man. Luckily, I just checked it before. There was one extra one that I hadn't seen, but we're going to cover that question anyway. But it was a good one. Yeah. So, bro, take us tell me, because obviously you're originally from New Zealand, and you obviously ended up in the US Army. Talk me through growing up in New Zealand and then how you went from New Zealand to the US.
I lived in New Zealand. I was born there, native New Zealander. My dad and dad's side of the family are New Kiwis. My mom was an American. So when they split up and divorced, my mom came back to the US and brought me and my little brother, obviously with her. I was 11 or 12. So yeah, 1998, moved from New Zealand to the US. And then obviously grew up in the U.S. ever since. I did have, I think we said it in the last podcast, because I had some issues joining the U.S. military because I had tattoos already. And then I remember getting to the point where, because I just wanted to join the military, I went to call the New Zealand Defense Force. And I remember talking to the guy on the phone, and he was like, all right, here's all the stuff. I was like, yeah, well, I have tattoos. And the guy was like, oh, good for you, mate. It wasn't a thing for the New Zealand Defense Force so much. It was like, I still remember that. Just the guy being like, all right, I don't, it's a weird thing to tell me. But my friends with the Marines and the Army, they're like, I don't know, you have too many tattoos.
Really? I thought the Marines was there's heaps of guys with tattoos in there. Like that Cody Alford dude, he's got them all over it.
Might have got those after you got out, but I think it's also easier to get them once you're in. Because I went to join the Marines first, and I had changed their tattoo policy a few days prior to where you couldn't have anything on your forearms. And the Marine recruiter was like, "Hey, we can't take you, but don't worry, we know who will." And walked me down to the Army recruiting center. Thanks.
Yeah,
take anybody.
Because I thought the Marines was like that. I thought the Marines was like a take anybody sort of option.
I think, during the GWAT, I think both ground branches probably were a little less selective than the Air Force, maybe. But the Marines, I think, were a harder bar to entry, at least with tattoos.
Yeah, I thought that was a bit strange. So, bro, so when you were in New Zealand, you left it when you were, so you left when you were 12 or 13, you said?
Yeah, it's 12. Probably 12. I think I turned 12 the first summer I was in the United States. Probably do
Any
the math.
particular reason, any particular reason you went over with your mum as opposed to staying in New Zealand with your dad?
I don't think staying with him was really an option. I was just kind of going with mom was really the only place we were going.
Yeah. Do you want to delve into that a bit, or is that just a particular thing in your family that you don't want to probably go into?
I Yeah, I made my dad left when I was a kid, and didn't really talk to him again until I was an adult.
Yeah.
I had on and off conversation. I don't think I saw him from when I was leaving New Zealand till, man, I was in the army, so I was at least in my early 20s.
Jesus, man. Yeah. And the reason I ask is because I remember I've seen on your Instagram profile you've got a photo with you and your dad for I think it was for Father's Day. So
Yeah, so I did go back home for a few years before in the before times before COVID, and so I haven't been back since. But I went back a few years in a row. So I think that picture there, he was in the States, so I went and visited him while he was here. So that's like reestablished a relationship now as an adult, but not when I was a kid.
yeah, that's hectic, man. So what was the cultural like as a 12, 13 year old, 11, 12, 13? What was the cultural shift like from New Zealand going to the
I'd
US?
been with my mom's family here. I'd been to the States a few times, and one of the things I remember, three things. It was really food related. It was the cereal aisle in an American grocery store. I don't know what it was like in Australia, but back when I was a kid in New Zealand, it was like you ate Wheat Bix, or they did have Fruit Loops, but there wasn't. There's like six different cereals, I think I remember, and then going here where there's like two full aisles of it's all kind of the same stuff, but I've never seen so much box sugar. Root beer. I'd never had root beer before, so I'd get root beer wasted. And then fake cheese. Just like the processed, like single wrapped cheese. I'd never had that in New Zealand either. So,
Really? Because I mean, we got that here in Australia. I thought it would have been the same in
yeah.
New Zealand. Like you would have had a lot of those imports, or is it pretty fresh
I
there?
don't, I mean, sure they do. I think they do now. I don't know if at the time, I don't know because I was a kid, if I just never saw it or had it, but I just never ate it until I moved to the United States. So I associate moving to America with fake cheese slices as well.
Yeah. And what about school? So did you go straight into school, or was there like a break where you're sort of adjusting?
I moved here over the summer, so there was like the summer break in the U.S., which was different from New Zealand too, with year-round school. Um, yeah, so I was hung out for like the 3 months of the summer, and then started sixth grade. Yeah, started sixth grade in the United States. Um, I remember in New Zealand, kids didn't talk as much shit to each other, at least because you played rugby at lunch, or you'd get in honorable fisticuffs. So that was one of the big differences I noticed school here. Like kids were bullies, and like um, wouldn't often like fight each other. It was just like they were all 13-year-olds that are going to be horrible to one another for the next 3 years, and no one really weren't often any fights about it.
Did you try and punch on with any kids when they gave you shit?
I got in a few fights, yeah, and I remember because that was one of the moments where uh, the vice principal or something like said, "Hey, you can't hit him. You have to tell a teacher." Like, I don't know. I have to tell a teacher. I can just hit him. Well, if you want him to stop saying that, you can tell a teacher. I'm like, well, also, if you want him to stop saying that, you can punch him in the mouth, and they probably won't say
Yeah.
it.
'Cause that's my impression of New Zealand, that it's like a pretty rough and tumble sort of place, right? And I don't know if that stems from like that Maori warrior culture thing. Am I right in sort of assuming that?
I don't know, 'cause, I mean, it wasn't. I remember everyone went to school barefoot often. We all had school uniforms. I don't know if that's like that in Australia. Even public schools in New Zealand, school uniform. Um, and then you play rugby at lunch barefoot. And rugby was kind of, because I remember when I was a kid too, I wanted to play soccer. My dad at the time, it's like, no, you're not playing soccer. You're in New Zealand, you're playing rugby. So, I mean, there's lots of rugby, none of them barefoot. Uh, but yeah, it's as much as I remember. I think the stark contrast in schooling was just kind of, we'd play rugby at lunch here. There wasn't a lot of that. There wasn't any rugby moving here. So actually, my mom put me in basketball, which I did like and play in New Zealand too. But I remember I fouled out of almost every game in basketball. Like I don't know, you get 4 or 5 fouls. Um, I remember the coach using me strategically like an enforcer in hockey. Like because I was just tall. I was lanky. I was tall, and I was used to playing rugby, so I'd get every rebound. I'd win every center court toss up. And then when I think one of the good players would kind of get smashed or something by a dude on another team, they'd just kind of put me in the foul and I'd go back to the bench afterwards. So
You're like, Evan, go do that New Zealand shit out there, you but
yeah, go that guy. Like, okay, put me in, coach.
so you're early, so what's sixth grade? Is that still elementary school, primary school?
It's called middle school or junior high, depending upon which state you're in. But I think it would have been like Form 5. I don't know if they still call them forms over in New Zealand or if they do that in Australia, but it was, yeah, Form 5, Form 6,
Yeah.
the
And then
12 to
because
13 ish.
probably your early years of high school would have been September 11, right?
Yeah, I have to do the math, but I was a freshman or sophomore. So my first or second year of high school was when 9/11 happened.
Yeah. What was that like being in the
It was,
States?
so I was in Washington State, and that's where I've spent most of my life here. And I remember waking me up to turn on the TV, and I think the first plane had hit the tower. So we're 3 hours behind, and on the other side, complete other side of the country. And I think I was watching the news before going to school on a second plane at the second tower. Understand references of 15, because I think at first, people thought it was an accident, and then the second one, I think there's a certain, at least perceiving a certain amount of disbelief from the adults around me. I think we still went to school, and then I think we all got sent home later that day, or early that day.
Yeah. But obviously, yeah, as a 15-year-old, you don't grasp the full gravity of the situation, right? Because I was about the same age,
Yeah,
and I was just like, you know, we were like semi-joking about it because we didn't understand what it all meant. We thought it was just, another thing on the news.
yeah.
Yeah. What about we went into this last time. Tell me about a stupid pickleball game that they got over there.
Pickleball, man, it's a game of gentlemen and scholars. It's I didn't know what pickleball was until I went to community college briefly, a brief stint. Um, and it's like a hybrid of tennis and ping pong ball, kind of. I think that's the best way to describe it because it's like tennis. It's tennis sized court almost with a low net, and then paddles that are more similar to a ping pong ball paddle, like a wooden paddle. And I needed an elective, I think, for my associate's degree. So I took pickleball and got college credit for running around for, I think, half an hour playing oversized ping pong ball. It was a good time, though. I mean, if there were any courts where we were, would have given it a go.
It sounds like racquetball or something.
Well, it's because racquetball, that's the one in the room, right? Like squash, racquetball.
Yeah, up
Um,
against the wall.
yeah, it's not, it's a little bit different than that because it's more like tennis on an open court. And then I think the pickleball itself has holes in it, maybe.
Yeah,
It's more like a wiffle ball kind of thing. I don't know if it
sure.
bounces. I don't remember that. I don't remember that. I haven't played it in a long time, but I always thought it was entertaining that in my higher pursuit of higher learning, I got credit for taking pickleball as a elective athletic class.
Yeah, because the sports stuff's massive over there, right? Like the college football and I don't know what the divisions are in basketball, but like the one that feeds into the major league or A league or
Oh
whoever
yeah,
it is. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, all those sports are all pretty huge here now. They have because I've never really been I'm not a big football fan or watcher, just because I don't like rugby league. I always played rugby union, so having the ball stop in between each plays always seemed real boring. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot because that's kind of New Zealand growing up. It was like it was rugby really, like that was a sport. Unless my sisters played, field hockey and netball. Um, but here, yeah, it's tons and tons of sports stuff.
yeah. And if you hate rugby league, you must fucking hate NFL.
Yeah, it just isn't. I mean, I'll watch the Super Bowl and do that kind of. It's almost like a holiday tradition type thing, but yeah, I don't. Not a big. I'm not going to sit down and watch a game of football or pay to go to one.
Yeah, because we went to one on that last trip. It was like the Colts versus the Rams, and like the spectacle of the game was unreal. And that was just like a regular game. Here, that would be like the biggest thing in the world. That was epic, man. The flags and music and all
Oh
the
yeah,
entertainment and stuff. So I
yeah. I
imagine
mean,
like yeah, I would probably only do like a Super Bowl sort of thing because fuck man, the game itself, I was like, what the fuck are they doing? Why are they stopping now? I didn't even
yeah,
see where the ball was. It's like watching hockey. I'm like, where's the puck? It's moving too fast. So did you have a dog at that time as well, like a pet dog or anything?
I did. I had a dog. That was my first dog. His name was Darby, and he was a boxer lab mix. And he was like I think if I remember right, he was a puppy that no one wanted to buy from the local pet store, so he had been there for like 4 or 5 months or something like that. Um, I think my mom knew I'd wanted a dog, and this he had become, he was a discounted dog at this point because he was the puppy that no one bought when they were puppies.
Hmm.
Um, so I had him. Named him Darby. I thought he was the greatest dog in the world. You look at your dog, you're like, man, that's an awesome dog. Finding pictures of Darby, man, that's an ugly, ugly. He looked like a lamb that someone hit in the face with a shovel. Uh, he was a good looking dog when he was my dog as a kid. I'd take that dog down to the beach, all that stuff.
Yeah. Was that a big influence for you going to the military as an animal care specialist, or it was just like, it's just a dog, pet dog. I love dogs, and it's about as far as it goes.
I think I did like that. Having him as a kid, that like I was really hung out with Darby after school. I mean, I had friends. I was a weird kid for sure. Um, but having him, he was kind of like go down to the beach, always take Darby. Go down to the corner store, always take. I think I took him off leash a lot too. Um, I'm not sure I ever even trained that dog really, but he's a good dog. From what I remember, um, so I'm sure it played a role in how much I like dogs. But one of the reasons I joined as an animal care specialist was my grandfather, who was in the U.S. Army for like 21 years in Vietnam, Korea.
Yeah. Is that the photos on your Instagram? There's a photo of a dude in uniform. Looks strikingly like you.
Yeah, it's probably him. I mean, he's taller than me, like 6'6", 6'7", but yeah, he was 21 years in the army. He was in artillery Uh, I volunteered for both Korea and Vietnam, I think twice each. They never really talked about either war much. Uh, the only story he would really tell me growing up was his cousin and uncle. So it was another Nolte that was in Vietnam. It was a dog handler. He had a dog named King. He would tell the story of how he was driving up to this other camp to find another Sergeant Nolte. And, a guy was holding his arm and bleeding and said, Sergeant Nolte is, but his fucking dog just bit me. So he had an infantry scout dog in Vietnam. I think it was a shepherd. And then I think because of that unfortunate story of Vietnam, the majority, like the vast majority of the dogs behind there, either the king was killed or he didn't make it back. So my cousin, uncle, or other family member, relative that was in Vietnam as a handler, he he ended up painting drawings of the dog lost in Vietnam. So I found out that part later, but that was really the only story I grew up. As a kid, you want to hear your granddad tell stories of the war, but also not really knowing the difference of people don't want to tell their stories of the war. But that was one that I remember him sharing growing up. It's pretty much just that one.
Yeah. Okay. When did he pass away?
June 2020. He luckily didn't die of COVID, but had been in congestive heart failure, and then so he died. I think June 8th, 2020.
Yeah, hectic. Did that have a big impact on you? Were you guys close?
Yeah, I think he couldn't see or hear very well. Had hearing aids for a while. He was pretty deaf, and I have hearing aids too from my and so a lot towards the end of his life, it was really us just kind of like yelling at each other. It's kind of hard to like he couldn't hear me, so I'm screaming at him, and but we were definitely close. Him and my uncle are probably the two kind of male influences that were role models on growing up. So it was tough, especially because COVID happened during that time, and I was still active duty. So I was still going to work every day. So it was kind of I had been vaccinated, I think. No, I wasn't any vaccine yet. Just so I was kind of certainly controlled, but I was exposed to other people all the time. So when he was in a hospice center, so I wasn't. I didn't go see him before he passed because of the whole kind of keeping things quarantined and limiting access.
Yeah. Fuck, that would have sucked, man. I know that was a real sore point for a lot of people, not being able to go to funerals, see relatives in the hospital, crossing borders, that type of stuff.
Yeah. I did get to talk to him on the phone. We actually had like a real solid, like I said, because we couldn't always hear well, especially talking on the phone. I can't always hear well talking to people on the phone. So yeah, I think we had like 30, 45-minute conversation that was perfectly clear and coherent. And so that was the last time. So I did get to talk to him, but yeah, I just didn't get to go visit.
Yeah. That's good, man. Mate, at least you got to have that good conversation with him, mate. Like a nice clear
Yeah.
one. And yeah, no, cool, man. It's interesting. But bro, that's the bet your is uncle or great uncle?
The one for the handler in Vietnam,
Yeah.
I think I can't remember exactly. He's either a cousin or a cousin. Yeah, I think he was a cousin. I think like
Yeah.
I forgot the explanation because I think he died earlier on in my life.
Yeah. Because that Vietnam stuff with the dogs was brutal, right? Like they fucking left them all there, and some of them probably got
Yeah,
taken, and whatever. So,
yeah,
and then I know a lot of people were drawing parallels between that and Afghanistan when they withdrew out of Kabul, and there was those photos of all the dogs in the kennels or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, brutal, man.
I think because that was a contract facility, like a contract company that
Yeah,
left their dogs there, and so at least the good news was that the U.S. military didn't leave any dogs behind this time as opposed to Vietnam. But still the DoD employee had contracts with working dog kennels overseas that would work the ECPs, and obviously they didn't take the time or make sure to stipulate those dogs were evacuated as well.
The fuck, eh? You gotta feel like
No.
all the time, even if you're not like quite a dog person, all that time you spend with that dog, on your deployment or whatever your rotation is, surely you've got to have some attachment to the dog and then want to get the fucking thing out of there, right? It just boggles my mind, man.
You would think, but I don't know. I'm not saying this is always the case, but I just had a weird experience overseas because I'd help treat some of the contract dogs over there. And so there was this one contract handler who I forgot his dog's name. It was this big Dutch Shepherd. I don't know what it is about big Dutch Shepherds, just like to bite their handlers. But yeah, it was this South African dude that I don't think he liked his dog at all, and his dog didn't like him. And so he'd been bitten, I don't know how many, I think 6 times on that trip. So the guy's arms were just destroyed. And so he's just trying to work this dog that's just eating him up.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing about Dutchies, right? They seem to come up the lead for some reason. I've seen it a heap of times.
Yeah, this dog did not like his handler at all. I'm not sure the handler. I think I watched him get bit one time. Came into the vet. I was like, oh, you gotta muzzle him, dude. I was like, oh, I can't get a muzzle on him. I'm not putting my face down there unless you do. And then I got bit again in the hand trying to put the muzzle on him. He's a number 7.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, then that's a perfect segue. Talk us through joining the army, and then why did you join as an animal care specialist?
So I didn't join, I watched 9/11 happen, but I didn't join right after school. It was 2 years after I joined when I was 20. And I kind of struck out on my own at 17 before that, and I worked a bunch of odd jobs in a structural steel factory. I was a dirty punk rock kid. So I went to work at like 3 a.m. It was structural steel. I think I was in the break room looking at all of these old salty iron workers around, just sneezing black soot and flash burned eyes. Just having a weird moment. I was like, I don't want to do this when I'm 64 years old. So for whatever reason, kind of looking at my options, I decided to join the military. And I had a close friend, still a close friend at the time, who was joining as well. So we just started going down the recruiter together. I think trying to join the Marines first. I think he tried to join the Navy first, and we both ended up joining the Army.
What did you join as? Did you have like an MOS?
Yeah, he ended up being a linguist, and I ended up choosing an animal care specialist. That was one wanted to work with military dogs. Family reference of the story my granddad told me. So I think I went in there and was like, I don't know that I did any research. I was like, oh, I'd like to be, an infantry scout dog handler, which doesn't exist anymore. They stopped using those in Vietnam. And he's like, well, you can't just join to be a dog handler. He's like, but you can join to be an MP. And then after a couple of years, apply to be a dog handler. And again, I didn't know much about the Army outside of a couple of my granddad's stories, but I knew from watching military movies that no one seems to like military police officers. The MPs always show up to ruin a good time. No offense to all of my MP friends now. But so I was like, no, I don't want to be an MP. Like, I don't want to be an MP with the off chance of becoming a dog handler. What else have you got for the dogs? Specialist.
And what's the mandate, so to speak? Like, what does an animal care specialist do in the US Army?
Basically, you go to a veterinary hospital, and there's the veterinarians and the veterinary technicians. So it's more or less the same thing. There's a variety of career paths in the Army versus just there's our Army veterinary hospitals. They're there to support working dog teams. Then there's field units. And then eventually there was the special operations positions, where I ended up spending the majority of my career. And you can kind of go a few different ways. And I was really lucky that for my 14-year career, I think I spent 12 years with the working dogs. A lot of people can end up, in clinics or field units or in some other positions where you're not necessarily working directly with the working dogs. But I'm like 10 years. About 10 years, I have to work directly, being assigned to dog kennels, not hospitals.
Yeah. Because it's a pretty broad field, right? You're not just, like you said, it's not just working with dogs. Like I know there's, like last time on the podcast, you sent me a bunch of photos of like you working with like dolphins and monkeys and gibbons and
Yeah.
shit, or whatever it was.
Luckily, I did not have to work with any monkeys because they terrify me. But they have the caisson platoons, so they have the horses still. Like they'll have the ceremonial horses, so they have Army veterinary personnel to take care of those horses. They have, because I got to go to SeaWorld and help out there for like stage things where I was kissing a whale.
Yeah, that's
One of my
oh wow.
one of my buddies made a bet. He was like, "I bet you can't." Or he said, "I don't know." What ended up being the bet is that I will kiss a marine mammal today, and you will buy me dinner if I pull it off. So when we're getting the tour, the woman trainer of the whale, I think because they're showing animal husbandry, they're showing the training, and then even their veterinary staff, these like aquarium centers and stuff. And so I was like, this is seeing the beluga whale trainer. Just raised my hand. I was like, hey, if you let me kiss your whale, he has to buy me dinner tonight. And she's like, yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, the
Sealed it.
whales.
Yeah. So I got to do a lot
Good
of cool
man.
stuff.
Yeah, nice. So talk me through when you went to your first unit that was working directly with dogs.
That ended up being in Virginia Beach. Because initially I went to a field unit, to a medical brigade where they had a combat support hospital. And the unit was gone or leaving, so I was left behind. And then I got called into the brigade sergeant's major office because he didn't know what an animal care specialist was. Like, and it's as similar as like to a. He was like, "What's in it? What do you do?" And I remember because I told the story before, but he, I'm a private in the Army, and he's asking me what I do, and I don't really know how to answer that question because I honestly don't know what I do. I just got here. I remember telling him I take care of military working dogs because that was my frame of reference. And he said, I don't have any dogs in my brigade. And he was short on medics, so they sent me to EMT school and stuff on Fort Lewis and a bunch of other kind of auxiliary training, and I just got assigned and utilized them as a medical support for human soldiers for less than 2 years, but kind of the first 2 years. Did a bunch of big training exercises. They had these on Fort Lewis. They used to have Warrior Forge or LDAC, so it's where all the ROTC, like the college kids that are becoming Army officers, they would have to go to kind of like their boot camp, which was held at Fort Lewis at the time. And so me and another medic were assigned to a 4-liter ambulance, an FLA, which is just like a Humvee ambulance. And we supported fire missions for the artillery battery that would shoot. And we got U.S. weapons for the firing range. Like they had to go to all these stations. So the one I got put on first was U.S. weapons, where they were learning how to shoot crew serve weapons like the SAW, 249, 240. Kind of seeing all the dumb stuff. I mean, they're college kids that are about to be lieutenants, but just really not the smartest. It's concerning. It's concerning. I think I had like field promoted to an E4 at that point, right? Like a expedited promotion. Still, I mean, yeah, still not like I know what I'm doing, but just being a specialist in the Army, like a 21, 22-year-old specialist, and seeing like the 24-year-olds that are going to be put in charge of the company or put in charge of us here shortly as they're learning to shoot machine guns.
Yeah, it's funny like that, eh? Like you look back now as a 30-something-year-old, and you're like, oh man, how can a 20-something-year-old even be capable of that?
Yeah, especially I don't know if I told the cough drop story the last time we were on here.
I don't know. Tell it
Have I ever
again.
told you? Have I ever told you the cough drop story? So
I'd
really, all we
say,
had to
go
do
ahead.
on these had a couple. There were a couple like minor injuries, but other than that, we really just handed out moleskin, which is for their blisters, and then flu packs because they were all flying in from all over the country. So it's just like going to enlisted boot camp. Everyone's getting sick in close quarters. And the flu packs were, ibuprofen or Motrin and cough drops. But on the container, it said they were like government issued cough drops. It said cough menthol lozenges. Um, the NCOIC, the non-commissioned officer in charge of that weapons range, she thought medics were lazy because we honestly don't have to do anything unless something bad happens. We're just sitting there. So we wanted to make sure we were wearing all our stuff. We wanted to make sure we didn't take naps. We weren't allowed to do any of this stuff. And so I ended up, what I would do is I'd put the C collar on. I'd sit there in the passenger side of the Humvee, put the C collar on to hold my chin up, and then I'd put my sunglasses on and pull like my uniform thing up. I had the plate carrier on, so you couldn't see it. So it looked like I was sitting there paying attention, but I'd just be sleeping. And I think that's important for context. So when these cadets are approaching, like they may tell them like, "Hey, go to the medic" or something, and they'd come up to our FLA. And for context, as this kid knocked on the passenger window of our FLA, I have a neck brace on. So I roll down the window and turn my whole body to
Like
we were
Batman,
supposed to
yeah.
we couldn't call them cadets. We had to call them warriors. So I remember, I said, "What do you want, warrior?" I said, "Oh, I'm looking for some cough drops. You need cough drops." I'm like, "Sorry, I don't have any cough drops. I just have cough lozenges." And so she said, "Oh, never mind," and started walking away. What the fuck? I said, "Wait." It's like, wait a minute. Why don't you want any
Okay.
cough lozenges? Like, why don't you want any cough lozenges? Because I don't know what those are. So, being the kind of person I was, probably still am, I took the opportunity. I was like, "Oh well, cough lozenge is just like a cough drop, but it's an anal suppository. You boof it."
You did
And
not tell
he's
this
like,
story last time.
"Oh, that's that." So, and so he was like, "Oh, dude, I'm not doing that." I'm like, "Oh, hear me out. There's a lot more capillaries down there, a greater surface area. You're going to have, it's a faster rate of administration and absorption. So, you just put one of these up your prison pocket. You won't cough for a day, guaranteed." And I thought there's no way, like someone at some point is going to tell this kid, like, "No, dude, that's just a cough drop. You don't put that there." And also, I keep in mind, I'm maybe 2 years younger than him. I've got a neck brace on, sitting in a Humvee. Like, yeah, here's your cough lozenges. Good luck. And I didn't think of it. Like, honestly, didn't think of it again. Like, and I remember the next morning, the lieutenant colonel came down and was like, "What fucking medic told one of my cadets to shove a cough drop up his ass?" Because they were menthol cough drops. So as he used that cough drop, much like a dog thermometer, it started to burn, and he ended up being casevaced, or evacuated in a van to the Army Medical Center to have the burning cough lozenge removed.
Jesus.
Which I don't know, man. Like that took courage to have to, like, you're going to your friends and be like, "Hey, I think I fucked up." So of course, but when they're like, Why did you do this?" Like, "Oh, well, the medic gave me this, told me to do it." So I probably should have gotten in a lot more trouble for that than I did. Um, and yeah, that's when
That's gold.
that guy was going to be a lieutenant. Who knows where he ended
Yeah, 100%. That's a fucking good story, bro. You
up.
definitely did not tell that story last time.
I know he thinks of every time he goes by the cough drop aisle at a grocery store now, though.
Oops, button camera. Oh, fucking hell. Obviously, that guy would have been graduated, gone on to be a lieutenant, captain, whatever.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I was always waiting, like later in my career, I was always somewhat waiting for a major, to it was you were the guy, but
Yeah, like major ass burn.
yeah.
Yeah, funny man. All right, bro. So, talk me through when you started working directly with the dogs. So you've gone out of, you're in that sort of generic hospital kind of unit. When did you move into like a kennel? Which unit was that? Because from memory, it was 82nd Airborne.
Oh no, I was a paratrooper when later on, but I called. So I'd been there. I started going over to the hospital and actually getting to work with the working dogs. Asked my surgeon at the time. He was a great dude, so he just let me go over to the working dog veterinary hospital from being a field unit, like ground ambulance company doing support to going again and work with the dogs. And I really like the dogs, man. I like working with the dog teams, being the guys. But it's kind of, and it came full circle, and worked with some of the first special forces group dog handlers back in 2009, well before I ended up getting assigned there. And so getting the opportunity to actually work with the dogs, because I didn't, it was, everyone has expectations for the Army, and they're largely based on movies and stuff. I mean, it's really not. So I spent the majority of my kind of support phase just sitting in a Humvee or a company. There wasn't a lot. wasn't wasn't as exciting as I expected it to be. Um, so I ended up getting that experience with working dogs and calling. I forgot the name of them. Our HR representative. Every MOS has someone that helps do your assignments. So I just called her and said, "What's the time?" Said I'd like to assignments were available and volunteer for one. That was a lot of working missions. And I got sent to Virginia. I got to start working with naval special warfare there. We had the IDD Dogs, which was a Marine program briefly from the mid 2000s to probably around 2013 ish. So I ended up getting a lot of experience there where it was, I think we had, at least 900 working dogs myself. At one point, just myself
Jeez.
and a captain of an officer would do medical support for. Um, so yeah, that's when I got to really start working more directly with the dogs. Not a lot of, not a lot. It was with the Navy too, because the Army and the U.S. military, the Army is the only branch that has veterinary medical support. She uses the dogs. So I started my career with the Army, then went to and worked with the Navy, then the Air Force, and then back to the Army.
So that assignment at Virginia Beach, was that Dam Neck? Is that the Dev guys?
No, no, I got to meet their veterinarian and my counterpart there at the time, and some of the guys over there back then, because they would when they if they needed extra help, they would ask me to come over and I'd help just doing stuff with their dogs. It was the other I worked with the other SW Naval Special Warfare Group 2, and some of their first handlers like Mitch Myers, who's uh, you know him, but he had Barry, pretty sure. So and Joshua Morton, some of these other guys that were some of the first um, Navy SEAL handlers outside of the over in Denmark.
Yeah, okay.
And I would go. That's when I started actually going to the kennel. With, to some of the special operations canine conferences where that's kind of shifted. At first I wanted to join the Army. Ended up doing a lot of human medical support. Kind of got the experience that I did with the dogs. Decided I really wanted to work with those dogs. And with the opportunities that I got helping out with the NSW dogs, then that kind of shaped more of where, as they were assigning veterinary medical personnel to special operations dog kennels, that's when I decided I was going to try to go for one of those jobs.
And was that just an application process? They were just like, all right, looks like we're starting up this program. Put your fucking mitts
Yeah,
in the
there
air if you
was
want to do it.
there was there's an application process. I ended up working independently of a veterinarian a lot as well. That was another kind of unique thing of my career was I had a veterinarian over me, but sometimes we would be co-located. So between then, I went on, I deployed and supported the TED dog programs, and as another, there's a variety of working dog programs that were non-traditional, that were created and sustained during the War on Terror, that have since kind of wound down or been no longer used. But so the Marines had the infantry detector dogs, so it's kind of to give these, they're largely Labradors that would work off leash, to Marine riflemen who would then take that dog and kind of lead his platoon using the dog off leash to detect explosive devices. And the Army had a similar program called the TED program, the Tactical Explosive Detector Dog Program, where they would give, there was a greater variety in the breeds of those dogs. There were some labs, or also shepherds and males, but they were single purpose off leash detection, and then give them to a cavalry scout or an infantryman. Or there was one IT guy that we had as well that applied for the TED cannon position and got it. So I did a deployment with a 3rd Infantry Division TED detachment, and got asked or offered at least the preliminary. I got an email saying I'd been selected based on a variety of kind of on paper and recommendation things for the new special operations. One of the new ones anyway, because some had been around. And then I was in the middle of leaving Afghanistan, so I remember I replied to the email and said, I'll get this information to you as soon as I get home. But I ended up forgetting to do it while I was on leave. And then I got a second email. I think it was like, congratulations, if you've received this email, you've been past the initial screening for, a job at a special forces group. And it's like, oh shit. So I emailed them back then. I must have got this on accident. I got the application and totally forgot. Major at the time said, I was recommended. So they said, just get me and you'll stay in the kind of candidate list. So I was lucky.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and then there was kind of just like a direct support selection process. It wasn't, nothing they're going to make a movie about. And I passed all that stuff, and then I got offered the job. So I went from, career kind of was Fort Lewis, the Army first, then Virginia Beach, working with Navy handlers, and NSW is where I got kind of the first exposure and working with special operations dog teams. Then I got sent to the Air Force Base in the middle of fucking nowhere, North Dakota, but that was where I worked. I really was not looking forward when I got reassigned there. I was supposed to go work with MARSOC at the time, but after a long kind of drawn out battle, the person giving me my assignments, they didn't want to send me down to Camp Lejeune, so I thought for sure she'd find me some crappy assignment, because she ended up kind of getting, it's a long story, but I was like, oh, she's going to give me a really shitty assignment next, and she did. It ended up working out. It was like North Dakota, Grand Forks, North Dakota, small Air Force base. Actually had a decent number of dogs, and but it gets down to like negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit with wind chill there. It's just ridiculous. It's just miserable. And there's nothing around. Your Canadians come down to Grand Forks to shop at Target on the weekends. I mean, it's that far north.
Yeah.
I ended up working out because I'd been on the voluntary deployment list for years, but because of the number of dogs we supported up till then, every time my name pulled from the hat, so, hey, you can be you're next in line on the medical personnel voluntary list to deploy, I was considered mission critical to the current assignment. Like, they couldn't lose me with the dogs who were supporting the garrison, but when they sent me to North Dakota, my name got pulled up again. There was really no reason I couldn't deploy that wasn't mission critical in garrison.
Yeah, I guess that was, like you said, kind of lucky. Mate, let's dial back a bit. You sort of skimmed over your Afghanistan deployment. So, like, I thought it was 82nd Airborne for some reason, but it was 3rd Infantry Division, which is massive, right?
Yes, I mean, it's one of the large, it was 4th Brigade Combat Teams, one of the brigade combat teams under, one of the most, I think most of the infantry divisions are pretty well known from World War II. I mean, I think 3rd ID was around before then. I did have to learn about unit history when I got my 3rd ID deployment patch, combat patch. the sergeant major of the brigade combat team made me sing the Dog-Faced Soldier song. So I had to learn that as well. I was deployed with.
What's that go like?
Oh, you want me to sing it? I actually don't remember it.
Bullshit.
I'll send you a link on Spotify of the 3rd Infantry Division song.
Yeah, all right.
And there was 10 handlers. I believe there was 10 handlers I was deployed with in RC East. We were at Fob Shank, and they working in Logar and Warden province.
Is that north, south? Where's that?
East. It's kind of southeast. It's pretty sure Logar or Wardak. Shank ended up getting, I think, largely turned over back to the Afghans and became Camp Dalkey, stayed open later on in the war. The next time I was back there, but it's in the east, south of Kabul. I want to say maybe an hour and a half south of Kabul.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. And what was the mission? Oh, sorry, what year was this?
It was 2013.
2013. And what was the mission at that time?
And there were still, I think that might have been one of the last years of kind of large scale combat operations for the Army, at least, where they would have platoons of infantrymen or engineers go do presence patrols, route clearance. So the handlers would rotate. They'd work on a rotational basis, but they probably had at least 1 or 2 dogs going out with platoons on a daily, weekly basis. And so I lived and slept with the dog handlers. It was part of the operating base called Camp Hellhound. It was the dog kennel. They go to outlying sites, different camps, and support units that were there. But the way it kind of worked was they had the TED detachment for the brigade combat team, and certain handlers got kind of assigned to different battalions or companies. And so if they wanted a dog, they just put that in their mission plan, and they would call down to the kennel and say, like Sergeant Swaney and Rudy are going out tomorrow on a key leader engagement, presence patrol, whatever their assault mission, whatever it happened to be, and they would just go out there, obviously, and do their explosive detection.
Yeah, awesome. And you said there were infantry guys that had dogs. Is that what it was?
Yeah, they weren't traditional military dog handlers, at least at the time, especially at the time for the Army. They weren't MPs that had gone to canine school. They were the infantrymen and cavalry scouts, by and large, that had applied for this TED program. And really the idea behind it was a contract company trained and maintained the dogs. The Army basically just kind of rented them for the duration of their employment, which ended up not being a great policy or idea. And so these infantrymen would do kind of their pre-mission training or their train-up. They'd go to a really kind of short handler course. So it might be like, I want to say maybe a month, like a 4-week-long handler course. They'd be given their dog, and this dog is kind of, the idea is it's supposed to be a push-button dog, that anybody can pick this dog up and show them properly how to like direct it and reward it. The dog's going to find explosives.
Sure.
Obviously, this program had successes and failures because not everybody probably should have handled the dog. Not every dog that the vendor supplied was really what they were supposed to be. But I do know the guys that I worked with, almost all of them, the vast majority, 90%, ended up being really effective working dog teams. I think the TED dogs that I deployed with and supported, they had at least, honestly, I forget the number, so I shouldn't make one up. But I know that they had so many IED fines or denied so many devices that at certain points, as they like fired rockets and mortars into our compounds and stuff, they started trying to hit the dog kennel because they knew that they ended up knowing where the dog kennel was because we had signs outside the kennel in Pashto and Dari that said caution military working dog kennel. And they could see that from a hillside right outside the fob. Because I remember that we'd get rocketed and mortared almost every day. And one time the battle captain called up to the kennel, and I answered the phone, and he was just notifying us as they do their kind of point of impact, point of origin data for incoming or indirect fire. They're getting bracketed by indirect fire, which it appears because of the number of IEDs and like S2 intelligence and bracketing that they're noticing the amount of IEDs that the dogs in this province continue to find.
Yeah, they're crafty little fuckers, eh?
Yeah, because I remember they would, they'd walk this camel up on this hillside and they'd be peering in with binoculars, and everybody knew what they were doing, but they don't have any weapons or anything, so you can't do anything. I think we used to, at one point, we had some golf clubs and golf balls. We just used to golf balls in their direction, trying to get them off the hill from their forward observing.
Yeah, we had kind of a similar thing in my base. We were right up against this hill, and they could just like walk behind the hill. It was almost like they just had total freedom of movement, which I guess they did outside the base.
Not all the bases are strategically placed. Some of them, you're just kind of in this bowl, and they're on these hillsides, just looking directly down into everything that's going on in there.
Yeah, well, like that. There's that movie that came out a couple of years ago. It was about that guy that got the Medal of Honor, and where they like took over the base and they took the base back. Like that was like that, wasn't it? It was just this big fucking channel into the base, like a bullet and rocket magnet. Yeah, strange. All right. So what was the tempo like then? Was it a lot of direct contact with the enemy? Was it a lot of indirect stuff like the rocket attacks and the IEDs?
For me, it's primarily indirect fire. So it's to soft travel around for the most part. But with a lot of the presence patrols, there's still a lot of direct contact or troops in contact occurring at the time with those platoons going out. Honestly, it had been a busy but kind of uneventful. It was my first deployment too, right? So you don't have. I think sometimes your first deployment's the hardest one. It gets easier after that. But not having kind of those expectations and had not knowing even kind of the difference between the fighting season, and so like nothing really that terrible was happening. So we got 2 or 3 months into this deployment with dogs going out, but always coming back. And then I've seen like all at once, beginning in July and then August, that dogs were being injured and killed, kind of what felt like left and right. And so I think out of my trips and going overseas and training and stuff, we lost the most dogs during that deployment.
Yeah. And I know there was a couple of dogs that had a bit of an impact on you when it came to the treatment. Can you just talk us through like what was happening, the type of injuries and the like your involvement, the treatment, that type of stuff?
So the top 3 mechanisms of injury it causes death from working dogs, just I think the data collected until 2013 was gunshot wound and explosion. I never personally saw a dog survive an explosion, and then heat injury. So heat injury was on there too. And I would say that's pretty consistent with the dogs I saw, how they were injured, and what killed them. Had at least one of each. And I would primarily get the dogs. I would receive them at the forward surgical team or down at the flight line.
Yeah. And then what did the treatment consist of? Because I know you've got that BARC acronym that you use. I've seen you do it on Instagram a bunch of times. But that's a recent thing, right?
Yeah, so I made the BARC acronym primarily now that I'm training law enforcement. Because for the military combat or tactical combat casualty care, it's MARCH. The MARCH algorithm for first aid, hemorrhage, airway, respiration, circulation, head injury, hypothermia, extremities, everything else. But what if I guess we're good can edit this so it makes more sense. Since we're talking about it, I came up with BARC as because training a lot of law enforcement handlers is they're not. I think every soldier has a certain amount of first aid training. And I think it's somewhat changing in the United States. But a lot of dog handlers, they're police officers first, dog handlers second, or vice versa. But they're not necessarily medically trained. or, a couple of years ago, medically equipped. So I would, especially when I have a 1 or 2 day kind of interaction with some of these handlers, or maybe like at ATK9, right? I'm interacting with them for one run scenario. I get a lot of confused looks. We're going over the March algorithm, and by the end of that, 8-hour block of instruction or class, you're still kind of, it's not the easiest acronym to kind of remember all the various components, as well as outside of the necessity for prolonged field care, not every police officer really needs to focus on the secondary survey, in my opinion, of the March algorithm, right? Because I can train you how to notice your dog has a head injury, but there's not a whole lot you're going to do about that in the field, so I focus on training window. So bark is it's something I think has been easy to remember, and really focusing on those three things: stop the bleeding, keep them breathing, keep them warm. You're going to, if they're still alive and they're injured, you're going to greatly increase their chances of staying alive and survival once they get to definitive care at the vet hospital.
Yeah, nice. And so can you talk us through like the actual treatment when you were treating these dogs, and you were like, were you learning through mistakes, or was it just the system that you used, you were just like, nah, this is not effective?
Learning through mistakes, learning through a lot of veterinary clinical medicine being taught as appropriate field care, which just isn't, without the frame of reference, or you wouldn't consider these things. It definitely seemed kind of common sense or logical after the fact. And then, to be honest, a lot of the dogs we received, which is kind of statistically relevant, is if the vast majority of the dogs that are injured in those manners, whether they're shot or exploded, they don't survive. So many of the dogs we received, we were just receiving their remains pretty much. There was, by the time they had died, by the time they got there. And then, the dogs that I had done CPR practiced CPR before, been trained in CPR, but then the first time really doing it was in Afghanistan. And it's also when I learned, you learn that CPR isn't often successful.
Yeah, because what's the success rate of CPR? It's fucking low, isn't it?
For dogs is less than 10%, which is greater
Shit.
than humans, I believe.
What is it with people? Like 5%?
I think like 5%. Unless you're watching a TV show and it's resuscitated with CPR.
Sure. Yeah, because I've never done CPR myself, but I've got a bunch of mates that have done it, and none of them ever survived.
But I've never done it a few times, never had it work.
Yeah, it sucks, man. So, dude, one of the questions on Instagram was, and it's kind of ties into what you're talking about now and what we spoke about in the last podcast. Like, are there any particular dogs that have had a big impact on you, and can you sort of walk us through their story?
Yeah, there's been a bunch. There's been a bunch of them. So I think I saw that comment. Because I've talked to that guy before. His name's Matt. It's hard to pick. One of the first dogs was Max. He was the first dog, and he was one of the dogs that was assigned to that TED detachment. And he was the first dog that died. The first one I kind of knew personally. We built a swimming pool in the back of the canyon compound. Max would go swimming. That pool got gross pretty quick. And then, he was killed by an IED that was placed hastily behind and had to regress back through a trail they had already cleared. Max saved the life of his handler and at least 2 other soldiers. And then I ended up receiving his remains. And there's kind of a whole, it was a shit show. His remains, because so seeing what he looked like, what had happened to him, and trying to kind of not really being prepared for that. And so having that kind of visual, as well as the time, the mortuary affairs, the morgue there in the camp, refused to, the non-commissioned officer of that facility outranked me. There was nothing I could do. We didn't have anybody else. sergeant, and sergeant was the highest ranking person, I think, in the kennel detachment at the time, and we tried to take Max's remains. And again, like to preface this, the whole combat support hospital, the flight crew, everyone was great. Like they got us a flag. We draped Max's remains with the flag, and then when we got to the morgue, the staff sergeant in there refused to take Max's remains and put them in cold storage because she wasn't going to put a dog in the same, place as human soldiers. Is that somehow, um, yeah. So without
Like, as in, she was somehow offended by the concept of a dog and a human in the same.
To be fair, I don't know if it was a policy, but I do know it's a policy other mortuary affairs soldiers were willing to overlook in the moment when, like, we're not talking about putting a camp dog, in cold storage with human soldiers. We're talking about a military dog, a war dog that just died and saved lives. And so, yeah, I remember without a variety of options available, the only thing I could really think of is we ended up taking Max's remains back to our facility, back to our kennel, our camp, kind of cleared out the team room, put his stretcher on there, and turned the if you remember the Chigos, or those little portable AC units. So we had a few of those, so we turned them down as cold as we possibly could, and then stayed in there overnight with Max in the middle of the room. But I don't think any of us acknowledged it that morning because his handler had been injured. His handler took some shrapnel, but he ended up being released from the field hospital and coming back to the compound. So we all stayed in there with him and Max. But obviously turning on air conditioning units is not cold enough to preserve or prevent decomposition. So by the time morning rolled around, it definitely smelled pretty bad in that room. I think we all pretended we didn't want to bring it up. Just going to pretend like it wasn't there. So like, hey, especially with his handler still being around. And then that following day, we ended up so we did also get a hero flight. I've always been a big fan of medevac and dust off. They've always been willing to fly in, out, or transport our dogs whenever they were injured or killed. So they ended up doing a whole hero flight, transporting Max's remains up to Baltimore. It was cremated.
So when you had Max in the team room and then his handler had come back after being wounded, was that the first time he'd seen Max? Did he already know he passed away?
Pretty sure he knew Max was dead at that point. When I bagged up Max's remains, I put him in a body bag. I didn't because I did that without the dog handlers helping me. So some of the medical officers helped me do it. And everyone, they had asked to open the bag, but I didn't. After we zipped that bag up, I didn't let anyone open it again. For a lot of reasons, but even the condition of the remains. So I'm not sure his handler ever wanted to. So he never, other than when it detonated, Max's remains were kept sealed at that point.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Wise decision, and that's obviously something that's affected you, right? That you, like you said, you probably weren't quite prepared for to see that.
Yeah, and I think you're kind of naive to, like, you obviously know things that happen, but even being able to cycle for 3 months, nothing that bad's happened. So you really start thinking you're going to ride out the rest of your tour without anything major happening.
Yeah. And what about the other dogs? Because I know last time you were talking about the sound of the dogs. So like, and I hope we're not going too deep into this. But I know last time you said that whimpering, whining kind of sound of the dog has an effect on you because obviously you've got a conditioned response, like maybe a post-traumatic response from that.
Yeah, I started noticing that at the tail end of my career, kind of as I slowed down, like as I started being medically retired, brain injury stuff, and what ended up being, symptom, post-traumatic stress. it never really affected me. I don't know if we talked about it. It was I talked to guys I served with, I never, you'll see guys get out or see guys struggle. And I was always kind of sympathetic to that. I never was, like, oh, you dickhead for, struggling emotionally. But I just
Yeah.
really never experienced it. So I was like, yeah, well, I don't know what that's like. It sucks, but like, I'm good. And then, I think, I largely worked without a veterinarian. So a lot of times if something happened to a dog, it was kind of up to me to, and not always, I had plenty of help. Even if it was by myself, their handlers would help. Or sometimes being like the only medical staff around. And really, for some of those situations, not necessarily being prepared for beforehand. You're just doing your best. There was, I think, a lot of adrenaline, kind of parasympathetic kind of adrenaline dump with that. And, a lot of times the dogs that do survive, or the dog, even just injuries, they whine. And so during kind of that down, like just before leading up to COVID, but I was going to be I was being medically evaluated for discharge or retirement. And I think something happened. Oh yeah, I had like auditory hallucinations, which I didn't know at the time. Like, I was in the shower. I thought I heard a dog screaming out in pain or whining, so I just busted out of the shower. Yeah. Just soaked up everything. And my wife at the time, she was laying on the bed reading with our dogs, and she's like, "What? What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Did you hear that? Where is it? Like, what happened?" Like, what are you talking about? I was like, I heard a dog whining. She's like, zero sounds. Like, there's no reason to come charging out of the shower. There's no injured dog. And then I would kind of hear it. I know it's like right jumped up. And another time, I heard the dog whimpering and whining. I was just like super sweaty. I've been awkwardly sweaty before, but there wasn't a good reason. I just was like, I feel sweaty. And I remember talking to my buddy who was a PA. I was like, yeah, man, I don't know what's happening, but so he asked what happened. And I was like, oh, the dog started whining. I just like got really hot and started sweating. And he's like, it sounds like it's happening. I don't know those. And so then I started to notice that, yeah, even still, if I hear a dog whine, I'll kind of, it's, everybody, jump at fireworks, but I'll jump if I hear a dog whining.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope you don't mind me saying this, and I could totally edit this out, but I remember at ATK9, the diesel dog obviously simulates the whining and a bit of movement and whatnot. And that was something that you said was kind of setting you off a little bit, giving
Yeah.
you that sort of conditioned response.
It doesn't always happen because, something I can control, but I think in that scenario, when we use the, spoiler alert, but when we use the gunshot in conjunction with the whining sound, um, even being able to rationalize and know what it is, no, it's not real, no, it's not training, I still have like that spike, feel that spike in heart rate. And then much to, and sometimes like, you can get a little bit more on edge. And I think, some of the handlers come in there and they aren't dicking around or something. And I'm already kind of a here instead of here. I think I can be, I'll start getting a lot more frustrated when they,
Yeah. Like, stop fucking
yeah,
around. Think the dog's dying,
yeah.
sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah. That sucks, man. And I guess that's kind of your reality, right? Have you ever been diagnosed with PTSD or anxiety or anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah. They've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress.
Yeah. And what do you do to reconcile that? What's like, how do you deal with it?
Um, well, I did, I go to, they have a VA here. I don't know what that, the Veteran Affairs. So that's hit or miss, there are horror stories. There are other, like the VA coaching now, I'm pretty solid. Got any hearing aids, good appointments. But, so I went in there, started going to behavioral health because I got evaluated for the med board, and then continued after service.
Yeah. And you happy with it? Like, you happy with the way it's going? You happy with the treatment you receive from VA?
Yeah, it's some has sucked. Like there've been some, and so there can be a high turnover rate, which can make it difficult too. Uh, yeah, that's I don't. I'm not a fan of prescriptions, pills. So I think I tried that for like a year or so. They put you on like those SSRIs. But I remember I just like whatever it was, whatever antidepressant, I just didn't feel like I felt like not necessarily like shit, but just like nothing. Like you'd lay there in bed and not be really sure whether there's any point in getting out of bed. So it didn't really seem like I kind of did the thing where they tell you, oh, you just have to adjust the dose or find the right drug. And after doing about a year of that, and being like, I don't necessarily feel any did when it started, just stop taking all those and have instead, I think, found being active, like fitness and being healthier. And even not so, I don't do the behavioral health appointments as much. I'm going to like start again or keep up with that. But even just talking to other dudes, other people that I served with has been, I think, can be massively helpful.
Yeah. Do you think that's like a not being alone thing? If you know that other guys are going through the same or similar thing to you, that it's sort of normalized, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's been like guys like Sean and seeing not only like seeing guys like Sean, people who got to the other side of it and the things they're able to do now. Seeing people that I've looked up to and respected as junior to them, things that I've done, being able to talk about it. And yeah, I think that has been some of the most beneficial supports outside of like the VA processes each other. I think, did you interview Rick Hogg? Your
Yeah, I did.
podcast
Yeah,
with him?
yeah.
Yeah, even like Rick, I had served with Rick, trained in a lot of places. He does is a great dude. Him and Mark. Even early this year, I got to come to one of the shooting classes. I was talking to him and I said, the best job I've ever had. And he stopped me and said, the best job I've ever had. Yes. Like, been, don't get stuck. Back there, which it can, at least for me, have a tendency to do, looking back, never really be that cool again.
Yeah.
So I think like moments like that mean a lot. And having at least having those relations with other guys either have served with or served in the same time period.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, man. And I like that. I like what Rick said. Best job I've ever had so far. Mate, like, well, I'm sure you're the same. I love what I do now way more than the military. I love what I do. It's got so much more purpose and meaning to me. I feel so much more engaged and fulfilled. Do you feel the same about your current job?
I do still miss because I used to work, a lot more with the dogs themselves, so I miss that. I
Yeah.
don't. I love going to and seeing handlers' dogs now, but I don't have the same kind of like I see the same dogs every day. Um,
Yeah.
I don't miss jumping out of airplanes or anything, but still, some of the training and stuff we got to do that was always fun. But yeah, obviously I've got a better schedule now. I have the tendency sometimes to overbook classes. It kind of I'll start getting worn out from doing like speaking. Um, but yeah, I think that especially law enforcement now being the primary demographic for their dogs being injured or killed in the line of duty. I mean, law enforcement canine casualties outpace the military's by a large margin at this point.
Yeah.
They don't really have the same kind of training or visual support, medical support, and training. So, yeah, the idea that I can make a difference for a dog that gets injured or something in their hand or it has a first aid kit and knows how to use it. And not just me, but anybody doing that training. Hopefully, um, hopefully that'll. Yeah, I've had some messages which are great. Those are really the messages that keep because I'm doing largely the same thing I did in the military. But a lot of the messages I'll get if someone said, "Okay, my dog spliced open his leg jumping in a dumpster after this bad guy. I put a tourniquet on the way. I saw you do it on the internet. You know, stop the bleeding, save his life. So I find all that. I really appreciate those messages.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome, man. Yeah. And I know how much, like at ACK9, how much the guys appreciated the training that they did with you. Mate, even the just that real basic tourniquet thing we're talking about with the crate bandage.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard. It can be difficult to treat a dog that's injured and also knows how to use his mouth to hurt you, and they don't necessarily care that your mom or dad or their handler in that moment. So, um, just trying to set both realistic expectations for those handlers and set them up for success. Like, hey, if your dog's injured and still awake, this might be a challenge. So here's something that you can hopefully pull off until you can get some extra hands to help.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fucking good quality training, man.
Thanks.
Mate, I want to sort of fast forward a little bit to when you got posted to SF and then talk about that deployment. Um, which group were you posted to?
First Special Forces group for about 8 years. So on my
Awesome.
14-year career, I spent a little over half there, which was great.
And what was the reception like as a animal care specialist going into a special operations unit? Because they were new to
Um,
dogs at that time, or they'd already run dogs for a while.
they'd run dogs for a while. I met some of the first guys when back at the start of my career. I ended up, helping out a guy that's now a sergeant major. So he's one of the first dog handlers. So it's kind of cool getting to come. I knew him as a private, not at the group. He was in 67 as a dog handler. When I came back, I was a sergeant. He was at least a master sergeant 88. He was a sergeant major. So coming full circle. Uh, and so they had dogs for probably 6 or 7 years up until that point. So the like direct medical support was the new part. So they had a veterinarian assigned at the group or like headquarters level for a variety of things. But then I was being assigned to the kennel as kind of just they would have that organic direct medical support.
Yeah. Okay. So were you integrated into the teams? Is that how direct it was, or you were like based at the kennel and then you oversee the whole kennel kind of thing?
I ended up being both. So the way it worked is the handlers we had assigned, they would leave their teams and come be part of the kennel was kind of its own team. It was set up like an operational detachment. So there was 12 green berets and their dogs, the trainer, me, and a kennel master acting as a team sergeant. So we'd be based largely together in garrison or outside of training rotations or deployments. We'd all train together. I'd just go to training, grab my aid bag, having it like all that stuff. But then also I'd go with teams overseas, whether it was a training, like a partner force training mission, or doing a combat deployment where I did get integrated as part of the dog package. So I'd either kind of be in a quick reaction force or I think to go on some of the missions too, as with the dog handler, me, the dog handler, the dog.
Can you tell us about that first deployment then? Because that was Afghanistan as well, right?
Yeah. I went to Afghanistan. It was much different than the first one, right? Because with um, infantry brigade in 2013, those infantry units were still leaving kind of base to go on presence patrols, all that stuff. Fast forwarding to the special forces deployment, it was really just special operations with the partner assisted. It was really trying to get the Afghan commandos, Qatayans or whoever, to be autonomous with U.S. support. So maybe that team going out, us with a dog, and then sometimes up to 80 commandos. It was all at night, which is a big change to only fell once walking around under nods, which I was happy with. Um, and was did a lot of ended up doing a lot of missions. Participated. There's 4 dogs for the task force kind of went out on a rotational basis. Most injuries, we had one of the dogs was exposed to chemical agents. And that was stressful. He ended up ingesting part of it. I remember trying to call the animal poison control hotline from a satellite phone in Kandahar, and then there was no index case. Right? So like, hey, it says, what should I do? And it's probably going to kill him. So it ended up looking like that dog was going to die for a few days, but we were able to keep him alive. One of the side effects was the cat had chemically burned his nostrils, his nares, and his mouth, and his eyes. He ended up losing his vision, but we weren't entirely sure he could smell explosives anymore. Chemical exposure. So he shortly after that. But that was luckily at the tail end of their deployment because that dog was a replacement for another dog that we had to send back because that dog kind of shut down with field exposure. Just the dog didn't like rotor wash. Started to freak him out, and it's just gunfire, and I didn't see them because we usually have Apaches or a gunship overhead. So when they would start firing for air support, that would really that dog in particular started to really react to those loud explosions. That to be fair, it's hard to kind of get neutrality to that. Garrison training.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you, like, the dogs that were there, were they assault dogs? So they're bite dogs, or were they dual purpose?
Multi-purpose, called the multi-purpose canine program. So there's all those different acronyms for the MWD program, or military working dog program, is the traditional Department of Defense and Army canine program. Then there was the IDDs for the Marines, the TED dogs for the Army, mine detection dogs, or MDDs for the Army, and then MPCs, or multi-purpose canines, for special operations. And they would do apprehension, explosive detection, and then tracking.
Awesome, man. Before because I want to talk about apprehensions and the tracking aspect, as well as like your operational sort of tempo. That when that dog had ingested that chemical stuff, what was the situation there? How did he manage to get in front of that?
So one of the I don't know if you ever came across handlers, and this wasn't this particular handler's fault; it was a previous handler. But when they start playing with their dog with water bottles, and there's Afghanistan, there's water bottles everywhere. And so there happened to be a water bottle full of an unknown, what ended up being like an industrial strength cleaning agent.
Jesus!
So the dog goes and crunches down in a bottle, just got a face full of concentrated industrial strength cleaning agent or something.
Hectic. I thought you meant it was like some sort of explosive or IED components or something like that, which I guess it may have even still been, right?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't being an explosive device.
Yeah, lucky.
Yeah.
So what about the tracking aspect? Because I know that I've not heard a lot of stories of dogs tracking overseas. Obviously, cops do it day in, day out. Did the dogs do any live tracks on those jobs?
We obviously maintain that in a training environment. A trainer would incorporate tracking into training on a weekly basis, certified in tracking. I certified as a handler at one point, and so it was 800 meter track to a toy reward, and 800 meter track to pretty sure that was the tracking certification standard. But overseas, I only know of one case of one of our dogs, at least, having a successful track to an enemy combatant. I think they were used to track or try to find the general direction, potentially. But even, 2017, at least at that stage in the war, a lot of the times the commandos would kind of be the leading security element. And so anything in front of the commandos wasn't necessarily clear or secure. And so even tracking or sending the dog apprehension-wise after bad guys or potential suspected bad guys wasn't necessarily worth the risk to the dog, because then if you send that dog on a squirt after a bite, now you have all that open ground between the commandos and that combatant where it's not clear, it's also not secure, and then trying to push commandos forward can be like herding cats. So it was, at that point, was the dog, bullets are cheaper than dogs. So there's no point in risking that dog if that guy's just running away and we can't engage him anyway.
Yeah, correct. And was this like counter leadership, medium to high value target sort of stuff? Who were you chasing after?
Yeah, there was HVTs, and then there'd be intelligence that like shadow Taliban presence in villages, illicit material or drugs, drug factories, bomb factories, prisons, Taliban prisons. The yeah, I guess that's the majority of it.
It's a big spread. That's an interesting little mission set, eh? And what about actions on target? What sort of combat are we talking about here? Real close stuff, or was it a bit standoffish, cordon call out stuff? What was it like?
It was at night, and so there was. And I'd be in the command and control element largely, where the dog was in the supporting element or the main effort. So anytime, all the gunfights I got in were at range. It was an opposing compound or something would strong point or hold one compound and then start taking rounds from another one. Like maybe 150, 300 meters away or through an orchard. And the commandos would push in first. It was the commandos were supposed to cordon and then clear, and then use the dog. They'd have the mine detection wands that, and then the dog. Honestly, at that point in the war, the dog was there to help protect and self-preservation of American forces or coalition forces.
Yeah, nice man. Did you lose any dogs in that deployment?
No, luckily, we did, not one of mine. There was a couple other dogs that were killed that year, but none of our task force dogs.
Yeah, lucky man. That's good. But did you do a bit of treatment, or was it just like heat injury stuff? Obviously, that one dog that inhaled those chemicals.
Yeah, there was that dog. There was another dog that had to amputate his toe because he got stomped on by a cow, like clearing, egressing through. They'd have those. Pretty sure it was a cow. Had to kind of maneuver through an open field of cows, and cow stomped on the dog's foot, breaking his toe.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunate. Luckily, it could have been a lot worse. Getting kicked by a cow.
Yeah, yeah, kicked your fucking head off. Fuck, those things are, yeah.
Yeah, there was one guy that was KIA. Just one guy, one of the infantry soldiers that was deployed with us for like a security.
Yep. And how did that happen?
He was a mortarman that got taken with a team mission. Ended up having an enemy mortar team, like a delayed burst mortar round that basically affected indirect fire. Exploded in a little housing. He and his mortar team were set up, wounding them and then being fatally wounded.
Oh, okay, so he'd been wounded and then he would have passed away in hospital.
Yeah, he did. Actually, he passed away before me because I was on the quick reaction force that was called out for that troops in contact after taking coalition casualties.
Yeah, shit. Were you involved in the treatment of that guy?
No, he had. Unfortunately, I did kind of know him because he was a private. So I'd spoken to him because we'd been on like a mission or quick reaction force together. So I talked to him a couple times. He had borrowed. This was the first mission he got to go out on. So I was the QRF for this part of the QRF for this mission. So as we got to stage for the quick reaction force, I saw he was usually with us, but I saw he had kitted up and he was going out with the team. And since I think I talked to him before, he was comfortable enough during the pre-combat checks and inspection came and told me that he'd forgotten his headlamp to show the team sergeant, like, hey, I got all my shit. And I always carried an extra one just because I'd use, especially at night, I'd use a headlamp if I was going to have to treat any casualties. So I remember I gave him an extra headlamp. So I'm off, and especially, most seeing remember my first mission and all the things I carried, not knowing what I should carry or would be important, just having way too much stuff. Not only that, it was a mortar man, so I had to carry like his base plate and everything.
Yeah.
But seeing how significantly he had overpacked to go out on his first mission.
Yeah, fuck, that sucks, man. Especially 2017, because that was like, you know, there's still guys there now. I mean, they were really wrapping up in 2017, 18, 19, right? In terms of combat missions, anyway.
I'm not sure there's any American forces left in that.
Yeah. So what about
I'm
when the? Sorry, go ahead.
say I'm almost positive there's no U.S. military presence in Afghanistan anymore.
Yeah. Were there any other major incidents on that deployment that sort of that impacted you and had an effect on you anyway?
I think most of it's those two. It's pretty stressful keeping Marco alive. And then, when Fisherman, when he ended up getting killed in action.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So what was that like then?
Again, no, I didn't know him well. It just sucks overall. Like, having spoken to him, he was a 20-year-old kid. He got married a few weeks before coming on this deployment, and then being killed in action. His very, very first mission, very first deployment, very first mission. I'm not even sure he'd been in the Army more than a year and a half at that point.
Yeah. It's almost like some fucking movie stuff, You're just like, oh, I just got married. It's my first mission. And you're like, oh, bro, this is going to end in a fucking disaster. It's fucking tragic, hey? Yeah. Because that was the thing that used to upset me the most about overseas, like when I heard that guys had died, especially because they were all like young guys, like around my age, and that was the only thing that really upset me. Like the rest of it, I didn't really care about, but yeah. So, mate, what was it like then coming back from that deployment? Did you would have gone straight back into first group, back into regular training cycle, obviously a bit of post deployment leave and whatnot? What was the
Yeah.
adjustment phase like?
It was harder. It was hard for that trip because we had worked primarily at night. I had really thrown off my circadian rhythm, so I had a time sleeping after that. That's kind of when I started having sleeping. I did with R3, like rest, recovery, refit, or what it stands for. So it got good downtime. Team sergeant at the time, you'd come and check in with him, and then he'd tell you to fuck off for the rest of the day. Just make sure you didn't do anything stupid, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And shortly after that, I went and kind of interviewed and worked briefly with Dan, potentially going to move to take that, do that job, get assigned there. And then done medical evaluation and board, so kind of concurrently with that. So after that deployment too, I started getting vertigo. So like just feeling it would start spinning, a lot of pain in the left eye. It had done a couple explosions and close to incoming mortars and rockets, and then started a helicopter, and then also playing rugby and having muzzle fighting dogs that had broken my nose and dislocated my jaw a couple times. Turns out, like, TBI symptoms caught up with me. So the guys at work, some of the guys, I still talk to them today. I'd come to work and I'd get out of my Jeep and just vomit on my way in because I'd get motion sick as I got vertigo and kind of dizzy. And so I vomited so much getting sick that I actually got a hernia, tore a hole in my stomach from so much vomiting.
Cool.
And at first I didn't really know what's happening. Like, oh, fuck. It's kind of like the panic attack, get all sweaty. And like, I don't know what's happening to me. So I just kind of, for whatever reason, tried to tough it out. I remember getting sent over to the Philippines and go with. There's a ambulance you'd have to kind of throw me in the van. So I couldn't really, I'd get so nauseous and sick. And kind of like, can't really do anything. It started kind of coinciding with my blood sugar too. So the guys, would carry like gummy bears and stuff. Like if I'd start getting nauseous and dizzy, they're gonna grab Evan's medicine. Like here, need some gummy bears before it gets any worse. Yeah, and I kind of initiated the medical evaluation board. And then after going to the TBI center, traumatic brain injury center in the Army for a number of months, and the pandemic started, so that kind of limited the in-person appointments. And I was supposed to do like vestibular therapy, eye therapy. So I found out that my eyes were kind of fucked up from getting knocked slightly out of place. That's why you get some of that eye pain. These glasses have like prisms that help redirect my point of impact, point of aim. So my eye's not always trying to pull itself back into focus, causing some of those migraines and stuff. Um, they determined that I would not be able to return to service. So they had this kind of physical fitness tests to time and do the event as a kind of an evaluation for if you're still fit for service. So I remember doing it, and part of it included this weird somersault, and then I took a knee and just vomited at the end of that evaluation.
And was that just the nail in the coffin? They're like,
we can't, we're not rehabilitating you for service.
Fucking hell. So what happens there? They just like the fast train to get the fuck out of here sort of thing, or?
Yeah, it took forever because of the pandemic. Normally it would take like 6 to 12 months. I think mine took like 18 months. And I got a 6-month internship as I left the Army, where I started working with the nonprofits, and the Denmother thing kind of started turning from like, because I started that Denmother account when the network started. I hadn't really had social media until then. I had Instagram. I had like a false name on Facebook and only had some friends and family. I kind of looking at rejoining the real world, which I thought so. I did so anonymously, and then just started really notice the like law enforcement in particular, like guys not treat their body, having first aid kits that were designed by someone in the veterinary hospital. It's kind of like a lot of, it's not for treating trauma in the field. It's like something you buy at the grocery store for when you cut your finger and need to put some rubbing alcohol and a Band-Aid on it. They started posting information on this Instagram account, and it turned into working with 10 nonprofits in a 6-month internship as I left the Army.
Yeah. And it was that partly that anonymous sort of Instagram account. Was that because of the special operations thing, or you just didn't want to be particularly public about what you do?
It was both. I mean, it was the kind of don't take pictures, don't take pictures, don't be a Navy SEAL about it kind of thing. It's a combination of that. Also, I just really wasn't like pictures of myself on the internet.
You get like you were afraid of being judged by your colleagues, sort of thing.
I think that was a factor there, but also just at the time, which I've obviously fine with now, as I videotape myself working out, but it was just a foreign I don't think I'd ever taken a selfie up until that point in my life. Like I might have been in some, but I just putting pictures of myself on the internet was a really foreign concept to me.
Yeah. Oh well, you've adjusted well, mate, but not in like
getting there.
Not in like a narcissist way.
That's the thing. I can teach a class. I can get in front of all these ultimately strangers, or maybe people that I've met once or twice or interacted with, and I can teach them a class. But the minute they start like recording me, or I try recording myself, it gets weird. It gets weird quick, and we'll see how that continues to evolve.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I was kind of the same in the beginning. I'm obviously over it now, but yeah, it's a funny little transition that, hey. But it's necessary too, like as part of your business. You got to fucking put yourself out there, and that comes with criticism too.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I mean, no one's going to say anything to you, Tom. Not with that face.
They wouldn't dare, mate. Like no one's ever said anything to me. Like I've heard a couple of things, but are you the same? Like, has anybody criticised the work that you do, or?
No, I don't think so. I think some of the guys have given me shit, but not in like a malicious way. Just you know, obviously it's kind of is different and probably unexpected. I mean, it was even unexpected for me at the time. Didn't really have a plan to end up doing this, but I mean, I'm glad I can get and still do.
Yeah. And I think for you, it's the impact you can have on people, right? That's your driver, right?
I think it's just having a unique experience, knowing that it matters. Like there's moments that it really does matter, and knowing how stressful it is in those moments if you aren't really prepared. You haven't been that guy, and not only that guy, but it's not like I was a dog handler that was trying to figure it out. It was the dog handler taking my dog to a guy that knows what he's doing, and me realizing in that moment, like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but there isn't anybody else to figure it out. So trying to, yeah, just trying to educate and train handlers in a meaningful way so that in one of their worst moments, they at least can say like, hey, I made a difference, or know that they did everything they could.
Yeah. I mean, even some of the little things that you've said to me. Oh, sorry, that I've heard you say, like at the conference, for example, when you were talking about wound packing, just the way you were describing that, and like some of the common mistakes, and I was like, that's exactly what I would have done. I would have made that mistake if I hadn't heard you say that. Like the way you got to plug it and then pack in over your finger, and yeah,
Yeah. And then I learned that one of the ways because been trained within when I was treating arterial hemorrhage was it wasn't stopping. It was really fucking stressful because there wasn't anybody else to be like, hey, can you stop this for me? It was just, you gotta stop this or they're going to die.
yeah,
And so, yeah, just trying to, get that. And even, you saw the Thunderdome, I really call the Thunderdome, just kind of trying to train through a bunch of, I mean, it's really stress inoculation, training through distractions, being able to think, oh, there's a bunch of bullshit going on, and it's going to be worse, like auditory exclusion, tunnel vision, when it's your actual dog that's there whining and injured with a gun. And seeing, it's kind of people looking at special operations training as some of as that scenario based training, like the length to which they'll go to recreate the reality to train these train the operators, right? And then having organizations that are outside of that, outside of special operations, somewhat for some kind of what I've interpreted as this idea that you can't train that way, or that's not how you train. That's how Green Berets train, or that's how Navy SEALs train. But it doesn't take that much to incorporate realism, effective scenario-based training to increase muscle memory and skills, rather than watching a PowerPoint and then sitting around a room talking about what you should do, or even just practicing in a tabletop environment without any stress or realism. There's a reason why Green Berets train that way, and there's no reason you
yeah.
can't incorporate that kind of training into your training program.
Yeah, I think that's something that like a lot of Australian infantry units are doing at the moment is they're taking a lot of those lessons learned from special operations and applying it to infantry. Because it's not like you get shot by a different bullet. It's the same bad dudes. So all the same principles and training should apply. So I like that, man. Yeah, but that's why I like business, right? Because you take what you learned in the military, special operations specifically, and then you take the best bits and you go, here you go, here's this package. Let's remove all the bullshit, all the ego, all the institutional, headbutting and ego stuff, and let's boil it down to its simplest form and solve the problem. That's why I love business.
It's just been something that's been weird to adapt to. Uh, Coming from an environment, I felt like it was always in your best interest if someone said, have you done this before? You should say no if you haven't done it before, because it's going to be very apparent. If you say yes, then you fuck it up. So always say when you don't know how to do something. And, like, even though, especially first integrating into the group, that was kind of scary, right? I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to say no every time having senior NCO or medic or Green Beret, like, cool, I'm going to show you. And that was my frame of reference for, I don't know how to do it. They're going to show me, and I'm going to keep practicing it until I'm proficient. So even at ATK9, like you were in there with me, and so have you ever packed a woman before I have them pack it? And most people say yes. And then I watch them like, you've never done this before. So you should just, so that's why everyone that came in there was like, no, I haven't. Like, cool, we're going to do it together then. Like there's no expectation. If you tell me you know how to, and then I watch you, I think you don't know. Why did you say yes? I clearly don't do this.
Yeah. Or they've done it, but they've done it the wrong way, and they've been doing it the wrong
Yeah.
way for years.
Yeah, that's possible too.
Yeah, interesting, man. So talk me through the leaving process, because I want to talk about leaving and then like what you do with the business now, like where you go, who you train with, that type of stuff.
You're talking about leaving the army.
Yeah, yeah. So like all through
Yeah.
COVID, and then actually getting out, and you would have just been like, did you have nothing, or you already had the Denmother thing, and you were happy that was turning into a business? What was the process there?
I had the Denmother thing, and I had created an LLC during COVID. I actually ended up doing it myself, and I really had focused at the time uh, a lot of effort in working with Canon nonprofits because that was part of my internship. And I just kind of had the idea that a lot of these police departments don't necessarily value or want to pay for, or whether they have training budgets or they're not prioritizing medical training. Uh, Canyons of Valor was one of the first organizations I spoke to and had a class hosted by them. Actually, it was before COVID. I think that was December 2019. And just saying, like, hey, these canine nonprofits exist, and here nonprofits exist to kind of fill these gaps in any organization. And here's a gap: these handlers don't have first aid kits, so they don't have good first aid kits, and they don't get a great deal of medical training, not on a large scale. And so I did a lot of that, and then have since just focused more on doing my own business, running my business. I get hosted for people will contact me to host classes, or I just like the Army Canine Symposium. The Army has me come back to help train soldiers and veterinary personnel and medical personnel. So now I still train with the U.S. military, primarily law enforcement handlers. I think even for me in the target demographic, I enjoy training military handlers still, but they still have their own kind of direct medical support, and even just passing on some of my experience to those military veterinary personnel so they carry that forward. But then law enforcement, they're still having 2 to 5 law enforcement dogs killed monthly in the United States. And so getting them equipped, giving them training, search and rescue, and training search and rescue groups. But obviously those risk factors, like trauma is trauma, but the risk factor is a little bit different. Largely if a search and rescue dog is getting hurt, it's by accident, not intentionally with a bad guy kind of fighting him or being willing to kill him. And then some, having got to go to Africa with leading the Canine Ranger Project. So I'm looking forward to that just because it's some of my favorite trips when I was in the Special Forces group was doing the partner force training, getting to meet dudes from other countries, seeing how like their dog programs kind of worked, and getting to train them as well.
Yeah, awesome, man. And dude, just expand a little bit on the Canine Ranger project, because obviously we're going to record a podcast with yourself, Josh, and Hannah when you guys
Yeah,
are over there in November. Give
that's
us the
1 month.
skinny on that.
So Hannah is definitely the best person to talk to about the Canine Ranger Project as the brains and leader of it. But she has ties and connections there. And obviously poaching is a huge issue in Africa. And I learned this quote from Hannah, and I don't want to misquote it now, but I think it's something like anti-poaching efforts are up to 60% more effective with the use of a canine team. So these dogs, through tracking poachers, through locating endangered species, I think those kind of primarily are able to increase conservation efforts. But then at the same time, these rangers over there and these ranger dog teams are kind of supported independently by wildlife trusts. more so than they're not federally funded. They really have very little support. They have, these dog teams may, I don't know, again, not going to make broad generalizations, but they'll work for days, kilometers, miles away from any support, just trying to protect these various species or track down poachers. So the Canine Ranger Project is trying to bring them training and equipment that they wouldn't otherwise have access to. So, and then rather than bringing them here, we're all going there, right? And then they'll come to us. I think it's about 50 dog teams, 50 Canine Ranger teams. And this has all been possible through donations, people donating and having auctioning things, having donation campaigns. And then none of us we're not getting, it's all funded, but we're not making money off of this trip. All of us at least are donating our time to teach.
Thanks for listening to that episode of the Origin Canine podcast. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, subscribe to the YouTube channel, give us a rating on your podcast platform, or go to origincanine.com for our tactical canine equipment, which includes collars, leads, harnesses, and merchandise. Thanks for listening, guys.